Can the blind see? Sometimes they can. I recently read an astonishing autobiography, an amazing story of courage and grace. The book is called And There Was Light. Its subtitle is The Extraordinary Memoir of a Blind Hero of the French Resistance in World War II. It was written by a man named Jacques Lucéron. Jacques was not born blind. He entered the world in France in 1924, a whole and healthy child who was, as far as back as he could remember, had an extraordinary perception of the presence of God. He never knew a time when he did not feel God's presence, a God he never in his life doubted was there. He writes, quote, "My parents loved me and took care of me, and yet I knew very early, I am quite sure of it, that through them another being concerned himself with me and even addressed himself to me. This other I did not even call God. My parents spoke to me about God, but only later. I had no name for him. He was just there, and it was better so. My religion began like this, which I think explains why I have never known doubt. This confession may seem something of a surprise, but I set store by it because it will make so many other things about myself clear. My recklessness for existence," unquote. And Jacques was reckless. He was fearless as a child, and yet it was nothing he did wrong that blinded him. That happened when he was 7 years old. A boy accidentally knocked him down so that his glasses flew off, driving them through his eyes, so that in one instant he was totally sightless. This did not stop his recklessness, though. It did not even slow him down. He continued to run with his friends, now holding on the shoulder of companions who always offered to act as guides for him. He jumped, climbed trees, swam, joined in rough games. In fact, he often led those games. He found that his blindness had actually changed very little for him. That's because he discovered that despite his blindness, there was light within him. There was God within him. He writes, quote, "I soon learned that light is an element that we carry inside of us. It can grow there with as much abundance, variety, and intensity as it can outside of us. So that I found that I could create light inside of me so alive, so large, so near that my eyes, my physical eyes, or what remained of them, vibrated almost to the point of hurting. And with that light, God was there under a form that was the good luck, that has the good luck to be neither religious, nor intellectual, nor sentimental, but quite simply alive," unquote. It was a rich, magical world in which the growing boy lived. And yet already there were forbidding sounds coming from across the border in Germany. Listening to the radio, Jacques recognized the hatred pounding through the speeches he heard from the new German leader, Adolf Hitler. He could not understand the words, but their tone was terrifying. He knew that here was something he couldn't ignore. He began to teach himself German, and by the time Germany invaded France, he was fluent. He was 16 when that happened, and as always, he had a circle of friends around him. They were drawn to him by his energy, his joy of life, his charisma, his reckless disregard of danger. As German troops marched into Paris, these friends all turned to Jacques. Within weeks, he had organized them into a resistance band. Think about it. A blind 16-year-old drawing together a group of boys no older than himself to challenge the most powerful and ruthless army that the world has ever known. Talk about recklessness. Talk about courage. The small band began to publish and distribute an underground newspaper. Soon, just to be caught with a copy of that paper was certain death, and yet they continued. They linked up with other groups to send secret information to the Allies. And when British and later American flyers began to be shot down over France, they organized their rescue and return. Jacques was the center of it all. There was not an hour of any day that he was not in danger. Somehow, though, he managed to elude detection for 4 years. But then finally it happened. He and his whole network were betrayed. They were arrested and tortured. And yet the Nazis could not quite believe that a blind youth, not quite 20 years old, was at the center of it all. He survived their torture. In the end, he and what others remained were sent to a place whose very name had become dreaded. Buchenwald, one of the most brutal of the concentration camps. Think about it. Blind, and in Buchenwald. Blind, and in a man-made hell. Again, Jacques began to organize, but this time for survival. He made connections. He encouraged others, helped others, and somehow the months passed until after over a year of this, he was at the very end of his rope. Sick, brutalized, at the edge of starvation, he was abandoned to lie among the dying. And yet even then, the life force he knew as God continued to pulse through him. He writes, quote, "Life had become a substance within me. It broke into my cage, pushed by a force 1,000 times stronger than I. It touched me and filled me to overflowing. I myself floated upon it. There were names which I mumbled from the depth of my astonishment. Providence, the guardian angel, Jesus Christ, God. I drew strength from that spring. I kept on drinking and drinking still more. And I saw then with absolute clarity that all of us are incapable of helping ourselves. But there was one thing left which I could not refuse to do. I could not refuse God's help. The breath he was blowing upon me. That was the one battle I had to fight, hard and wonderful as it was. Not to let my body be taken over by fear, for fear kills and joy maintains life. Slowly, I came back from the dead. And when one morning, one of my neighbors, I found out later that he was an atheist and thought he was doing the right thing, shouted in my ear that I didn't have a chance in the world of getting through it, so I had better prepare myself. He got my answer full in the face. A burst of laughter. He didn't understand that laugh, but he never forgot it. Not long after that, American soldiers appeared. By then, the guards had all vanished. As Jacques says, of the 2,000 Frenchmen who went into Buchenwald with me on that day in January of 1944, about 30 survived. You know, for a long time, one thing puzzled me about today's gospel. Confronted with a blind man calling out to him, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus asked him, "What do you want of me?" Why did Jesus ask that? I couldn't understand. The man was blind. Isn't it obvious what he needs? Then I saw it. The man had addressed him as Son of David. That's a Masonic title. He had recognized Jesus as the Messiah, which means he wasn't blind at all. Not in the most important way, anyway, the way that Jesus cared about. He wasn't spiritually blind at all. He recognized God for who God truly was. He could see what was most important. So, can the blind see? Some can. There are some who are blind who see God very clearly, and some who have sight who are totally blind to what is most important. It makes me ask, do I truly see as clearly as I might? In one sense, I do. Although I often wear glasses, I can actually see quite well, thank God. But as to the other, that spiritual sight, I wonder. I certainly don't see as clearly as Jacques Mousseron, who could see God in even the darkest, most difficult times imaginable. Perhaps then we can all learn from the blind man in today's gospel. Perhaps we too might share his prayer. Son of David, have mercy on me. And when Jesus asks, what do you want of me? We can answer with him, give me sight, Lord. Help me to truly see you. Help me to know that you are here with me and here within me, now and always. Two truths, Jacques Mousseron writes at the very end of his book. The first of these is that joy does not come from outside. For whatever happens to us, it is within. The second truth is that light does not come from us from without. Light is in us, even if we have no eyes. And by light, he means God. Amen.